This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Andrew Berry got a contract extension along with Kevin Stefanski. And in the same way, I wanted to talk about how having that second contract changes the expectations and really changes the bar in which those guys are going to be judged, right? With Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, before, we were really just judging them based on what the Browns have had in the past and if this is worth continuing based on that bar, because we were trying to build a foundation of stability before we can really start to compete with the other franchises that have had stability for a long time. And that was a fair bar to measure both those guys by in that first contract, because that's how you do things, is how you build things. You can't skip steps. You can't do shortcuts. This is how you build it, right? You got to make sure that somebody is better than what you've had in the past. You got to confirm that. And I think the Browns sufficiently confirmed that with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. It is not a controversial statement to say that Kevin Stefanski is the best coach the Browns have had since reactivation. And it is most certainly not even close to a controversial statement to say that Andrew Berry is the best general manager the Cleveland Browns have had since reinstatement. Both of those things are uncontroversial. They're facts. They're true. It is what it is. If you want to argue with me about it, sure, but ain't nobody trying to hear that shit because it's not true. That argument, like, there's no good argument. I'm just sorry. It just ain't. So those things are true. But also, the second Andrew Berry signs that contract, puts pen to paper, signs that contract, and now he's on his second contract with the Cleveland Browns. All of that stuff, how we measure him based on like the stuff since 1999, that stuff gets put in a box and thrown out the window. It does not matter anymore that Andrew Berry is the best general manager that the Cleveland Browns have had since 1999. It's a fun fact, but it does not matter anymore. It is not significant to how we're going to judge Andrew Berry. It's just a thing that's true about Andrew Berry. Because now Andrew Berry is going to be judged against not just his peers, but the top echelon of his peers. Are we in the top third of NFL teams in quality of general manager, in quality of head coach? These are the metrics in which we will use to judge the Cleveland Browns by, because that's the class we hope to join. For the first contract of these guys, we were hoping to get out of destitute, winning poverty, right? We were just trying to move on up out that situation. And now you have moved on up, and now you can set your sights on what everybody else sets their sights on, which is a Super Bowl, which is championship football. But before you can ground yourself and really go after the target, you got to make sure you out the mud. The Browns have signed their coach. They have signed their GM. They are out the mud. And now they're ready to compete with the rest of the league as far as structure and everything else goes. So how does that change how we're going to view Andrew Berry, or how specifically does that change the things that we want to see from Andrew Berry? Because we've never been here before as Cleveland Browns fans. We've never really been able to judge a general manager on the bar of it being their second contract, or judge a head coach on the bar of it being their second contract. We're always like, will they get re-signed? Will they get extended? Will they get fired before they even get the opportunity to get extended? This is truly new territory for the franchise, for many of us who did not live through the 90s and the 80s and the 70s. Like, this is new territory. We've never been here before. So let's try to chart some of that ground, right? Let's try to figure out what Andrew Berry is going to be asked to do over the course of the second contract and what he's going to be judged by. The first thing he's going to be judged by is the quarterback situation. Now, obviously, they traded for Deshaun Watson, and part of his judgment is going to be how you navigate the price that you paid for Deshaun Watson. There's the draft pick price, which the Browns have already navigated around, right? They already have gone through the era where they did not have first round draft picks. They ended those drafts, from what we can tell now, the two that we've experienced, with guys who you could say are first round quality players. So you still got good young players in that stretch of non-first round draft picks. So you still have young talent. You navigated successfully around that first pitfall of the price that you paid for Deshaun Watson. The second one is the one where it's a little bit harder to judge because you got to kind of know what you're talking about when we do this, and that's the contract, right? There's a lot of takes about what Deshaun's contract is going to do to the Cleveland Browns' future that are very misinformed, right? If you want to know how that contract is scheduled to hit the Browns, check out Jack Duffin. Jack Duffin always does a great job when it comes to the salary cap and the things that especially pertain to the Cleveland Browns and how that matches up with other trends around the league, right? When people were freaking out about Jerry Jeudy's contract, Jack Duffin was telling you it wasn't that big of a deal. When people was telling you at the beginning of the offseason that you was going to have to cut Nick Chubb and do all this crazy stuff and you might have to trade Amari Cooper because you're not going to have any salary cap, Jack Duffin was the one telling you that was all poppycock, right? Go check out Jack. Jack does a great job at that salary cap stuff, but the salary cap stuff is still something that AB is going to have to maneuver around because you are eventually going to have to pay the bulk of that salary with Deshaun Watson in 1 or 2 years. And those are probably going to be 1 or 2 years where you're either looking to soft rebuild, build around the core of Myles Garrett, Deshaun Watson, maybe Denzel Ward, and kind of add newer, younger pieces to that to rebuild, or you're just going to rebuild entirely if this Deshaun Watson thing does not work out. That's going to be something that Andrew Berry is going to be judged by. How do you handle that? How do you navigate that, right? The biggest thing is replacing valuable role players. When you are a team that's good, when you are a team that does a good job at drafting and developing players like the Browns have been over the last 4 years and hope to continue to be, you're going to have good players that you can't keep. No matter what your salary cap situation is, good players that you can't keep. When you have a good organization, that's just an inevitable part of the process, right? You're going to have to replace some high quality role players. Like Greg Newsome might be somebody on that list, maybe Martin Emerson, maybe JOK, like all of these guys who, look, they're very valuable. They're going to get big money somewhere else. You got to figure out a way to replace it. We see this happen with Baltimore all the time. They got to replace Pat Queen after developing him. You know, now it's the Browns' turn to kind of deal with that. How do you deal with that? Do you have a plan to replace these players? Is your plan sufficient? Are we constantly having a flow of good role players, or do we eventually just kind of run out of talent? It's going to be something to watch with the Cleveland Browns and with Andrew Berry. So far, I think he's done a pretty damn good job of doing that, right? You look at that first crop of guys that they brought in 2020, right? Austin Hooper, Jack Conklin, they found replacements. One was already on the roster. They just gave David Njoku an extension, gave him an extended role. Bam, you ain't never thought about Austin Hooper since then. Same thing going on with Jack Conklin right now. You drafted DeJuan Jones. You got really lucky in the draft, but sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. You get DeJuan Jones. You're able to replace Jack Conklin. You're able to move on. You're able to have a rotation in and out. They did a good job with J.C. Tretter as well, right? J.C. Tretter was a really good center for this team for a couple of years. Got to the point where you didn't want to pay for him or pay the price that was available for him, so you got Ethan Posick. Ended up being a smooth move, right? But you're going to have to do this with some aging veterans. You're going to have to do this with some role players. You're going to have to deal with turnover. I said this in the head coaching video. When you have success, you're going to have to deal with turnover because people want to pluck from your success, right? It happens with head coaches where you're a great head coach. You have a great team. People want to pluck your coaches. People want to pluck your system. People want to take this and that from it so they can add it to theirs and get better. If you have success on that personnel front, if you have good rosters, great players, and success on the field, people are going to want to pluck your role players, right? You might have been able to keep Grant Delpit on a team-friendly deal when you don't have outrageous success, but if you're a Super Bowl contender, if you're a Super Bowl champion and Grant Delpit's available, somebody's going to be willing to give him top-end money because, man, he's successful on a successful team. We want some of that success. It just becomes harder to retain your best players or your best role players, right? Your best players, they're pretty easy to retain no matter what situation you are in, and the Browns have done a good job retaining their core players. But your best role players, those are the guys that get plucked away and pulled away from other teams or get to the point to where the bidding gets so crazy that, yes, this player is valuable, but the money that they're getting offered just does not make sense for what you have. So you got to move on. You got to find a replacement. That is going to be one of the main things that Andrew Berry is going to be judged on, right? How do you deal with the constant flux of players who are good role players, might be here for their rookie deal, they get too expensive or the market gets too crazy on them, and you got to let them go. Can you replace those guys? Can you consistently keep that up, right? It's kind of similar to how we judge a college football coach, right? Because when a college football coach gets there is a understanding, like let's talk about Ryan Day. When Ryan Day first got to Ohio State, there was an understanding that a lot of the success that happened early on there kind of came with the asterisks because it was Urban Meyer's recruits that he was playing with, right? Those were like 4 years of Urban Meyer recruits. But the further and further you get along in Ryan Day's coaching career, the more skeptical you become of him because it becomes obvious that the level of talent is not the same level of talent that you had during the Urban Meyer era. So now you're questioning, like, can they replace the talent at the same level that they were? Now, you're not going to stay on a crazy pace like those Ohio State teams were, but you expect to be able to maintain status. And that's the same thing with the Cleveland Browns. You aren't going to find a Martin Emerson in the third round every draft, but you hope to maintain status. You hope to still be a good football team, still put together good rosters. What you have right now, this roster the Cleveland Browns have, is special. It's going to be very hard to replicate that again, but you should be able to replicate a 10-win team consistently, 11-win team consistently, right? Especially if you get it right at quarterback. And there might be something else that Andrew Berry is going to be judged on is, hey, if Deshaun Watson has a couple of good years, starts to age out in his early to mid 30s, which a lot of quarterbacks do, might have to find a new guy, might have to transition quarterback, another area where Andrew Berry is going to have to be judged on. So yes, it's great that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have gotten these extensions. But as they said in their interviews, now the real work starts. Now the real pressure starts. Now the real judgment starts because now they're no longer being judged on the low bar of being a good coach for the Cleveland Browns when the Browns have had no good coaches. Now you are the bar. And you have to live up to the bar that you set that got you that second contract. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's uncharted territory for Cleveland Browns fans. But y'all let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.